Good evening, evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the Centerville Regional Coach Call. It is still January, but our regional is fast approaching on February 7th. So thank you for tuning in to see what information you need to know to prepare your teams appropriately for February 7th. For those of you that have not yet met in person, my name is Emily Owens, and I'm the state director, and I am looking forward to the second Vaso Regional, which is going to be I believe our biggest tournament we've ever had in the state of Virginia. So, very, very, very excited for that. All right, here's our agenda. We'll get through like the stuff that you need to just be mindful of preparing in advance for tournament day, including build event signups and talk about rosters and things like that. And then we'll talk through the actual tournament day, all the things that you need to know or need to be able to direct your students to information about regarding things like impound, event materials, safety equipment, etc. And ultimately, especially for new coaches, like what your role is at a tournament so you can be really clear about like expectations from Vaso and also like from your team. So let's get started with that. So first, huge, huge thank you to everybody for providing your event supervisor submissions. Um, for those of you that didn't quite put these pieces together or are new, we tried something new with supervisors this year where we're actually assigning them in pairs. I think that was really, really successful at the Langley Regional. That everybody had like every event had two people that were like supervisors and went to training and were ready to go. I'm really like optimistic about how this will work for Centreville, which is a much larger tournament. But all event supervisors that we selected from your team submissions received an email from me confirming their event placement, and also yesterday or today received an email with like their lunch order form and also like a reminder of training. So I've done one training for them and I'll do another one if they couldn't make the first one. You can also see these assignments in the coach portal. So if you're unsure of who's assigned to what or which people we picked of your submissions, you can see all those in the coach portal. If you go to like submit potential ES, like it'll tell you which ones we picked and what they're doing. We have event group leaders that will be in contact with them to confirm logistics for the day. They should hear from them no later than like Monday. But so if any of those volunteers are coming to you to ask for information, you can direct them to emails from me and then also like looking for things from their event group leader. And like I said, we've already like started training. And so hopefully they will be well prepared. So again, thank you for getting us good quality volunteers who are excited, and enthusiastic. A reminder, I think the Centerville sign up for volunteers is mostly full. There's only a couple teams remaining that needed to fill some volunteer shifts. So thank you guys so much for being on top of that and getting your volunteer shifts taken care of. If you're still looking for people to fill volunteer shifts, these could be parents, they could be other mentors or community members to sign up on your team's behalf. This says Langley volunteering. It's definitely Centerville volunteering. I tried to catch them all when I go back through and edit my slides, but I missed one. But there's a Vaso volunteer portal. You can also see in the portal, in your side of it, who your volunteers are, what shifts they're doing. So you can see all of that information. And so, just like our event supervisors are so crucial to this, our volunteers are as well. We have a lot fewer volunteer shifts this year because we have the double event supervisors, but those positions are still definitely needed from scoring and math checking to, being timers on things like Scrambler. It takes a lot of people. So, thank you guys. A lot of what I'm going to go through for like the preparation for tournament day is encapsulated in that coach checklist that I hope you find to be a useful reference. So we're in that like mid to late January part where you have a lot of things that are coming up at once. And so I've itemized all these deadlines to help you see what's going on. And then also those deadlines are available in the portal. So for example, the build event sign up opened last week. you can see that it says January 28th at 6:30. Hey, that's right now. That's our coach call. And then we have a couple things coming up at the end of this week that include like rosters. So we can do wristbands and things like that for your teams. And then there's also some reminders at the bottom of that checklist that you'll see me referencing a bunch in tonight's presentation. Things like device checklists. Our resources page has a bunch of helpful information, clarifications, etc. I will also share out this presentation, but a lot of it is linked directly through this one pager. Okay, so one of the main things that we're all working on right now are rosters. This is one of the main items that needs to be done by the end of this week. So all students have to have a permission form filled out from the VASO website before competition begins. You can see those completed forms on the VASO coach portal. If a student has done it and selected their like correct school, or rather their parent has done it for them, they show up in the list to be assigned to teams. So if you don't see a name on your list when you go to create your team rosters, that means they don't have their permission form submitted. And if they don't have it submitted, they cannot compete. Rosters are due on Friday at 5 p.m. So it's kind of two steps. One, they have to have gotten their families to submit their permission forms, and then two, you have to go into the portal and assign them to your regional teams. Even if you only have one team, you still have to assign them because you may have extra students than the 15, especially if you've designated alternates, like within your own system. There's not a place where you designate them for us, but if you have to like swap kids out, if someone is sick or unable to attend, you just make a change in your roster. So here's what that looks like. Um, so yes, you can swap students from one team to another. You can swap, you can take a student off a team, put a different student on the same team. All of those things are things that you can do until 5 p.m. on Friday. Um, So when you go into the create your team rosters or create your teams portion of the coach portal, you'll see that you have a list of your regional teams, and it'll have a number for you of like how many students are already on that roster. So obviously, if you haven't done any rosters yet, they're going to be at 0. You can have a maximum of 15. And then if you're a C team coach, it will also keep track of how many seniors you have because you're only allowed to have a maximum of 7. So for every student that has had their family fill out the permission form on the VASO website, they'll show up in the bottom part that says assign students to teams. So if you see their name listed, they've already filled out the form. And then you can click into the empty box that says edit regional team. Um, and then um, you can just like select the one that you want. So let me show an example. Maybe. Okay. So I have some fake teams. So you're in the portal, you go to create your teams. And so you can see that I have 2 fake teams here. Um, and I have a bunch of students listed at the bottom. So, first you can make sure that they're listed correctly, right? This is where you can see your team numbers. They're also available on the tournament info page. Um, Team names are editable, so you can update those until rosters close. And then for any student, so let's say I have John Doe and I want to put him on team B17. You just click into that empty box. What will happen though is if you already have 15 students on a team and you want to change some to a different team, you might like to remove a student from that team. You just select, and it will blank it out. So if you already have 15 and you're like swapping students, you may need to just remove some entirely by choosing select, and then it'll free up a space for you to put someone else on that team. Okay. There's no like button that you push to like finalize your roster. It's just at 5 p.m., whatever you have done is your roster. Also, an important component of this is that you need to tell us if you're coming because we have wristbands for coaches as well. So when it says coming to the regionals and it has a list of coaches, you can click on it defaults to no. Click on that to say yes if you plan to attend. You'll see every coach listed who has a coach portal account. If they don't have a coach portal account, they're not getting um, a wristband. So they need to create a coach portal account on their own with their email address, and then I approve it, and then they can get a wristband. So you don't add them in; they make an account, just like you did for the Vaso Coach portal. Okay, so one of the questions, I want to look at some of the questions. I have two students as alternates, i.e., they won't compete as long as all our registered students show up. If we have an absence, how do I swap my alternate with that sixth student? Okay, so if you have day of changes that you have to make, so let's say it is the day of the tournament or it's like the night before the tournament, and you're like, this kid can't come, I need to swap a student out. As long as they have their permissions like the permission form done, we can do that. So when you come to check in at Centreville, you'll find me and I will swap that for you and make an updated wristband for the student who will actually be competing on the team. However, I will caution you about this, especially if they are builders. So we're going to talk more about build events. But it is very, very important that if you have a student who is sick or can no longer make it to competition, if they have built anything on a device that the other partner is going to be competing with, they must stay on your roster. If you remove them from your roster, you can no longer use that device that they helped build. So the device has to be built only by the 15-person roster. If that student's not on your roster, then that doesn't meet that criteria. So in a case like that, if they're not able to attend, leave them on your roster and then you can sub within your team to like send other students to those events rather than a completely different alternate. Okay. So that's absolutely always allowed, right? We don't write down like who's from the team roster going to what event. We just keep track of who's on the roster. Okay. All right. Okay, so for I'll talk about there's a question in the chat about event conflicts. The short answer to written test event conflicts is like we do not make exceptions. But I will revisit that in a little bit here once we look at like the schedule. Okay. Okay, so other things that you need to be mindful of as we're preparing for the tournament. One of them is the build event sign up. So once all your volunteer shifts are met, you have the ability to sign up your team for build events. So it's open now. It's open until the day before the tournament. Early that Friday morning, we close it down. That allows us to give our supervisors time to prepare. We print off the sign up so they know who's coming when. Um, but these are for your events like hovercraft, machines device, boom, and then scrambler or electric vehicle, depending on which division you're in. Anything that's at the bottom of the schedule that says self-scheduled, you as the coach sign in to schedule them. Or if you're a C team coach and your student leadership has like an account, they can also do this within the portal. But keep in mind that sessions for builds, they run all day, but like you have to pick a particular session, so make sure it doesn't conflict with your students' other sessions. And then also, um, obviously, the sooner you sign up, the better your chances of getting the sessions that you want. Some of them may already be filled, so you just do your best to pick what will work given what remains. Because we only have a set number of build events slots that we can give for each session. So to do that on the portal, there's a button that says schedule device testing. So you click on that, and then you'll be able to do that for every one of your teams. So back to my fake team account. If I go to schedule device testing, you can see that both of my teams are listed, so I have to do it for each of them independently. So you can then see um, what I have picked. Obviously, not all of these events will line up with our particular tournament since this is just a test regional, but you can see like whatever's listed in the drop down for a given event is still available. So if it skips session four, that means session four is full and there are no more spots available. Okay. So you can just pick a session for each of them. And then when you submit, you'll actually be able to see them listed at the bottom, what you picked. So nice little summary for you. Okay. All right, other things then, as we're looking at that like final week before regionals, obviously you want to make sure you're sharing your event schedule with team members and families, especially once you've added in like when the build events that you've signed up for are happening. You also should be really clear with them about when you expect them to arrive. We'll talk through what the beginning of the day looks like here in a little bit. So, it's up to you as the coach whether you say everyone has to be there when doors open at 7:30 or if you allow more flexibility for team members to show up closer to their session times. Just kind of depends on how you've chosen to run your team. But I will highlight the importance of impound events and that making sure devices arrive on time for that. Um, Make sure students have all the necessary materials for their events. Now, this doesn't mean that you're responsible for getting all their materials, but you may need to prompt them to remind them. Maybe your final practice in the week leading up to regionals, you go through and have every student make a list of what they need to bring with them. That could be things like chemistry event kits, like who's bringing that? Is that something you as a coach are bringing, or is a student bringing that? Are they in charge of their own goggles, or are you bringing some? I assume most coaches are not in charge of their students' cheat sheets, but they need to write themselves reminders. Obviously, like who's bringing the vehicles between the partners, like how is it getting there? Um, or even things like calculators. Who's bringing calculators? Do they have the right type of calculators for their events? And we'll talk through those as well. It's helpful to also remind your students to review the rules and to review any clarifications that Vaso has posted to double check all of this in advance of the tournament. Okay, and then especially with traveling teams, make sure families know, of course, how to contact you, whether you've set up like a Google Voice number, given your direct line, anything like that. I see something in the chat about impounding calculators. I'm not quite sure what event you are referring to. Written tests don't have impound. Oh, that's so it's not for the written test, it's for Scrambler. Um, so we can check the rules on that. The rules are pretty clear about what needs to be impounded. Um, so I would say that's something you can ask. It says tools do not need to be impounded. So I would assume the calculator counts as a tool. So keep in mind that invitational experiences may differ from regional experiences just based on interpretation of rules, the training that event supervisors have gone through. That could mean a number of things. That could mean an invitational was more strict or a regional is more strict. But they should, they can always ask event supervisors these questions. But for that particular instance for Scrambler, I would say it says tools do not need to be impounded. So, okay. Additional question related to Tutoring students. So if we need to sub in for a sick child and have two teams from our school, does the substitute need to be from the same team or a same school good enough? They must be the same team. Like they have to be on that team's roster. You cannot have cross team substitutions. So every student or every student who competes for Team A can only partner with students from Team A. No matter what happens, they have to be the same team. And then students on Team B have to be Team B. They'll have different colored wristbands, like our event supervisors are trained to pay attention to that. They must be on the same team. Okay. Other questions about prep. We're going to talk at length about tournament day, but we're talking about like the things that you need to do as a coach in advance of tournament day. Rosters, build event sign up, anything like that.
I may have missed this. How about the wristbands and stuff? Is that going to be handled
Yeah,
a
we're
day off or?
yes, we will talk about we'll talk about wristbands.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. So let's now turn to actual tournament day. So, as I mentioned, the Centerville tournament is going to be literally the largest tournament we have ever had in Vaso history. We have 24 C teams, we have 43 B teams. We've never had a tournament with like more than 60 teams, and now we're going to have 67. And technically, it's three tournaments in one. So we have um our C tournament of 24 teams, and then we have two parallel B tournaments, the Blueprint B tournament and the Infrared B tournament. And this was because of, in part, the like TJ problem solving essay administration, which was on January 24th. Um, that turned our B regional there at Langley into all elementary school, which was a blast. We had so much fun. But we wanted to be able to fit in any middle schools who wanted a Northern Virginia opportunity. So this is what we did. So our day is a full one. Doors will open at 7:30 at the main entrance of Centerville High School, and then we'll talk through each of the parts of the day, from device impound and what that means to then the written test sessions and the build event sessions that are happening from 9 to like 4. And then we have our award ceremonies. So, a very full day. And then just a reminder that when you're reading these schedules, your team number is going to be what determines when your students are competing at a given time for all the events that are not like scheduled in the portal. So if I'm coaching team C12, I would look to see that, oh, astronomy will be first session with experimental design, and then my second session would be anatomy and forensics. For our B coaches, you also like technically should pay attention to whether you're blueprint or infrared, but you'll notice that I kept the team numbers separate so that there wasn't any confusion. So blueprint team numbers are 1 through 22 and infrared team numbers are 23 through 43. So you're doing the same thing, it's just got an extra word in the front of each of them. Okay. So if your team number is 27, you're on the infrared track, and you'll be doing circuit lab and dynamic planet and water quality in session 3. You'll be doing Codebusters disease remote in session 1, etc. So you may find it helpful. Like we make these as Google Sheets so that you could make a copy if you wanted to, and like just pull out all the information that does not apply to your team. That is totally reasonable, and that's what I used to do as a coach. So feel free to do that so that your students don't get confused, or highlight for them or something like that. So we arrive at 7:30. And so head coaches will check in and students can then they students don't have to check in with us. They will just report directly to their home bases. Home bases will very likely be classrooms again this year. Um, I don't have those in the portal yet from Centerville, but I'm pretty sure we're using the cafeteria for some events. So they will likely be classrooms. You may have to share with other schools depending on how many teams you are bringing. But when I have that info, I'll put it into the spreadsheet and I will also put it in the portal. So students can head straight to home bases. Coaches are the only ones that have to check in with us from a team. And so when a coach checks in, they're doing it on behalf of the whole team or like the school's teams, and we'll give you a roster to verify. We'll ask you to verify number of students, and we'll give you your wristbands, including coach wristbands. And these wristbands are what you're going to take to the home base and hopefully immediately put on your students. We'll also have maps. We'll have a copy of the schedule. We have a trash bag for your home base. So there's a fair bit of stuff in there, but really, like the most important thing in there is the wristbands. So I do want to remind you as coaches that like verified school representatives are required to be on site for the duration of the team's presence at the tournament. And we assume this is head coaches, unless for whatever reason a head coach is unable to attend. And then we ask that a head coach proactively work with their school to designate a replacement who is authorized by the principal to like to be their school representative, to be appointed as such and to let me know of this change. Okay? So unless you make plans to have other people fill in for you, we do ask that head coaches are there the duration of the tournament while their students are on site. So let's talk wristbands. When you get your wristbands, um, one of them, or it depends on how many coaches you have. There will be a couple of them maybe that are in there that have coach names on them. They are purple this year. And they'll list all the schools or all the teams that your school has. Purple wristbands as for coaches is what indicates to VASO people who don't know you by name like I do, that you are a head coach, that you are able to talk to event personnel, you're able to file appeals, you're able to have those conversations. Um, so we also then take that to mean that if someone doesn't have a wristband on, that we assume that they are a parent or other community member, and we are not going to be able to discuss and share the same information with them about competition or talk about the team. So it's really important that just like the students, coaches wear their wristbands as well. For your students, each wristband will have their first and last name printed on it, their school and team name, and their team number. And then if you have multiple teams at your school, each team will have its own color. So maybe one set is red and then another set is blue. So gives us like a really clear visual difference for who's on the same teams or not. So remember that while your students may have all been collectively working together to prepare for the tournament, when it comes to tournament day, the teams, even the ones like from the same school, are competing against each other. So red stays with red, blue stays with blue, or however it's been divided up. They are expected to wear them the entire day. That they should be like not able to like slip them off. Um, I mean, we don't want them to cut off their circulation, but like help them put them on if they need to. And please put someone in charge, whether it's you or a trusted adult, put them in charge of distributing the wristbands so that they're given to their correct people. We've had it happen in the past where people didn't realize there were names on them and they just like handed them out. And then I had to make a whole bunch of new wristbands. So they are made for each individual. So please pay attention to that. And then the event supervisors will ask them, or should be asking them at the door of every event, like, show me your wristband, so that we can confirm that they have one, that they're on a roster, that they're with the correct team, etc. It's also nice because, especially for our students that compete at a variety of different tournaments, other invitationals and things, they may kind of get mixed up with like what their team number is. And so the wristband has it on there for them. So these wristbands serve a bunch of different purposes. One of them that I think is really important is to make sure that everyone is sticking to the 15 student maximum on their roster, because I will only hand out 15 wristbands maximum to a team. So it definitely helps us like safeguard the fairness of tournaments. And so because of that, if something happens with a wristband, there's some additional steps that the student or even the coach will have to take. So if a student doesn't have a wristband on when they go to a written test event, they will be turned away. They are not permitted to compete without a wristband. So they need to be checking in before they go to their first event to get those. They're supposed to be placed securely on their wrist. And if they lose it, then that's going to be a problem, and they're not going to be able to compete until we resolve it. Um, If it's just defective or damaged, like, oh, I put it on too tight and then I pulled it off and now I can't put it back on, the student can bring the band to Vaso headquarters or to me at check-in, and I can replace it, and then they can go compete. So that's easy if it's like, no, I have the wristband, I just can't put it back on myself. But if it's just full on lost, then the student and the team coach have to both come to find me if I'm not already at check-in or I'm not at headquarters or I'm just doing something else, I have to be called. The student has to wait until I get there. Then I have to hear what happened and then decide if I think that I can reissue a wristband. So it's definitely a more arduous process if a wristband is lost. So please stress that to your students, that they need to keep them on and they need to like for the whole day. Okay. All right. So, like I said, all teams are going to have a home base space. I expect this to be classrooms. I'm not quite sure if there are any larger shared spaces that Centerville plans to give as team spaces. Again, I will let you know. But regardless, we know that even if you have like a classroom that's dedicated to your team, there's a lot happening on a tournament day. A lot of people walking around. Sometimes students try to find other places to work or hallways to sit in. So please just tell parents and students to be respectful of other teams' belongings, devices, and spaces, no matter where they are. It is helpful whenever possible to have a coach or knowledgeable adult in the home base area during the tournament, both for the students and for us. So, like, if we need to find somebody, if we have questions or there's an appeal issue, we know like where our people can go to find you. So just as long as people know where you are, and again, if there's an adult who's able to stay in the space, to direct us if you're elsewhere for the moment. I do want to point out that we have a cleanup policy that is relevant to home-based spaces. So, if a team room or space has not been returned to its original state at the end of the tournament, we can impose a cleanup penalty that could affect the team's overall tournament score. I never want to do that. I'd much rather like remind teams to like, hey, can you please pick up before you leave? But just being clear that it's there. And you can use this for your students as well, right? Like there's this policy and you have to clean up. Teams should not use any supplies or equipment that belong to the space or to another team. So like if there's pens, sticky notes, printers, staplers, whatever in a classroom, please don't use them. For all we know that they were personally purchased by a teacher. So try not to don't use anything that's in their classroom space. Just use the desks and chairs as just a place to sit and hang out or study. This cleanup penalty can also be applied within particular events if students don't clean up. That could mean they like didn't pick up their device from impound before the end of the day. They left their Crime Buster station messy, and the penalty is 5% to the team's it's one rank, I believe, of their event score. So that policy is available on our website. But again, we hope we never have to use it, but it is there. So just remind our students to clean up after themselves no matter where they're going. Again, please don't use any materials in the classroom if your home-based space is a teacher room. Please don't use the teacher desk at all. We will give you trash bags so you can dispose of trash in that bag rather than in their small classroom trash cans. I think a really helpful thing to do, because we do this for our event rooms, take a picture when you're the first person in there so you know exactly how to leave it at the end of the day. I know our teachers who will return to those rooms on that Monday will greatly appreciate it. Okay, so that's like what's happening in the first little bit of tournament day. But then at 8 o'clock is when impound begins. And we have three impound events in each division. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that entails and what your students have to be ready for with that. So we're looking at in Division B, hovercraft, machines, and scrambler. And then in Division C, we're looking at electric vehicle, hovercraft, and machines. So that's not a typo. If you've looked at machines rules or been to invitational tournaments, this is a vaso clarification. This is not in the original rules. We are running machines as an impound event because we separated the device testing from the written test. So they are not happening at the same time. Instead, we have our students turn in their machines in advance, and then they'll just come back to test it during their like self-scheduled session. So what we mean by impound is that members of that particular team submit their devices for that event and anything else that rules require be impounded to be held by supervisors until their device testing block. So between 8 and 8:50, all of our hovercraft, machines, and then our vehicle event people are submitting their devices and anything else that they need to impound to the event supervisors. This does vary by event, so students should read the rules to know everything that must be impounded with their device. They also need to bring a pencil because we're going to have them fill out the top portion of their score sheet so we can put it with their device so we know whose device is whose. It is very important that teams impound during that 8 to 8:50 window. This is about fairness of competition because there are things that are shared after impound, like target times or distances, that we want to make sure teams are all like on a level playing field and they don't have extra information to be able to like tweak their device with. So by putting it in impound, we can be more assured that when they come to test their device, it will be just as fair, whether it's session 5 or session 1. And so because of that, failure to impound can result in huge penalties, whether they're significant point penalties or even a tearing down, meaning they get ranked below all other teams that impounded. It's a massive hit. So please make sure that your students who are on these build events are ready to impound their device between 8 and 8:50, that they don't miss that window. We actually have a really helpful impound FAQ on our resources page. So for people who are new to Science Olympiad, whether that's coaches or competitors, our resources page has this there so they can see, exactly what that time period entails. So, for example, like who may impound devices? The device must be impounded by one or more of the 15 members competing on the team. So, parents and coaches cannot impound devices, although they can help students carry the device to the door. So, our resources page, just to point that out, if you are on our website under middle and high school resources, and it's actually under both the coach side tournament day. There's an appeals FAQ, which we'll talk about, and then an impound FAQ. They're also posted again under event supervisor and mentors parents. But so they can go through some really important questions. Just this is especially if people are new to impound or want a resource to like direct their students to. Okay. Okay, so for actual device testing, When you sign up your team in the portal, you're signing up for a general session block, but know that like the actual testing doesn't take the whole time. There's no set order for teams that are signed up for the same block, so it's possible and likely that an event supervisor will ask if any teams want to go first. Um, and then the testing of the device, again, like no more than like 15 minutes. That's going to include discussion and questions with the event supervisor, measurements of device, and then actually doing the task. So, all of that in that 15-minute segment of time. It's important that students bring their appropriate safety equipment. So it depends on the event. For example, like boom lever, you better bring your goggles. But other ones like don't necessarily have like a goggle requirement. Again, just look at the rules. And then for anything that you're allowed to have that's not impounded, just make sure you bring that along. So obviously, boom lever doesn't have an impound. So you got to bring your boom with you. But like in the instance of Scrambler, right, it says you don't have to impound your tools. They can bring them with them to their session. Device testing for Boom, electric vehicle, hovercraft, and scrambler is open to viewing by parents, coaches, and other spectators. So you are welcome to watch. There are no other events during tournament day that are open for viewing. Whether they're like, we don't have like machines device testing, I don't believe will be open for viewing, and then none of our written tests are. So these are the events that are available for public viewing. In terms of the goggles that they have to have, again, depending on the event, there are different categories of goggles as listed in the rule book. This is just directly from that rules page. For for our build events, we're usually looking at category B goggles that have impact protection, and we know that they have appropriate impact protection because they'll have this designated marking that says Z87 plus. It must have that marking. So they don't have to be like chemistry goggles. They can be like the ones on the left here, but they have to have that Z87 plus rating on them if they're category B. So boom is the one that always comes to mind because of the like flying pieces of wood, but there are others. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about our construction policy just to be really clear with our teams about what is and is not allowed. So I sort of mentioned this earlier about like rosters, that a device that's being submitted for a team must be constructed only by members of that 15 student team. So it can't have alternates do any construction on it. Can't have mentors, whether that's a parent or a coach. Like, cannot do any construction on that. They are absolutely prohibited from constructing any part of the device presented for judging. It is perfectly allowable that parents, coaches, other, teachers, hobbyists, etc., other mentors teach students how to use tools, but they should not be doing the construction for them. Okay. So this means that we expect team members are designing devices that they can build by themselves. And they're going to be asked questions about this. So when they submit a device, that's some of the stuff that naturally an event supervisor will ask about. How did you come up with the design? How did you build it? Who built this part? What tools did you use, etc. If in the construction like of their device, students are not comfortable using a particular tool, they could ask other members of their team to help them, but it must be other members of their 15-person team. It cannot be students from another team, and it cannot be, again, a parent, a coach, a teacher. Like they cannot do it for them. So they either have to find a different way or have someone else from their team use that tool. They also should know that during actual impound and competition, teams are not going to be allowed to use power tools. They're allowed to use them in the construction before the tournament day, but just not at the tournament. Okay. And then if a student brings a tool, any kind of tool that an event supervisor thinks they're not using safely, they may be told that they're not allowed to use it. So they should be familiar with the tools that they're bringing. During the actual competition, It's also important that whoever built the device on the team is the one to present the device and operate the device in competition. Because again, our event supervisors are going to ask questions about this. They are, of course, they're going to ask about the overall design and construction. They're going to ask about the different parts. They're going to ask about how it operates, how they came up with a design to meet that operation task. Um, and if they can't answer any of those questions, our event supervisors may want to talk to other people on the team. Okay. Um, if a student can't answer a question satisfactorily, like it leaves some doubt as to who actually constructed the device, whether they think an outside person did it, a parent, a mentor, etc., the team could be penalized. It could go up to even a disqualification. So we want our students to present their own work and be able to talk about the process of their work. Okay. And we ask when students submit their device for impound or come to their session for competition, they're going to certify that the device was only built by members of their team. And they do that on this um, top part of the forms. So we have like a big score sheet. You can actually see them on our VASO website, like the full score sheet. But this top box is what students will fill out. So who they are, what school they represent, their team number. And then we ask them to certify that it was built only by members of the 15 student team. You'll see some other questions like did they use a kit? Did they use a 3D printer? Like these are okay things to use. We're just going to have some additional questions related to that. So if they use a kit, we're going to have some extra questions about, how they significantly modified their device. Um, to like change the operation of it to meet the task at hand. They can't just build a kit and do no modification to it. There has to be some element of design on their part. And then for 3D printing, laser cutting, etc., we might want to know like who designed the CAD file, who printed it, etc. So I mentioned that like parents cannot construct any part of the device, and I want to be really, really clear about the like further boundaries of parent participation. And hopefully, this is stuff that you have already relayed to your teams throughout the season. Again, they cannot construct anything on a device. If a student cannot do something safely by themselves, they have to find another way to do it. Um, Parents cannot test, assemble, or calibrate competition devices at any time. So we should not see a parent fiddling with a device at a tournament, even if it's before the competition session. It should be students who are calibrating and testing. Parents are not permitted to enter the competition area. They cannot interfere with an event in any way. They cannot offer advice or coaching from the sidelines. Even if they're the mentor for that event, it doesn't matter. They do not like not even coaches can coach them from the sidelines. Okay? There can be penalties assessed for this. They cannot touch or take pictures of another team's device at any time. And then they also shouldn't be contacting VASO directly. All questions that they have should be going through you as the coach. And we are going to talk about appeals and the parameters around that when there are some questions about rulings that our supervisors may make. But they should be, talking as a amongst the team. And then if there's anything that requires like further escalation, then coaches bring that to VASO. So hopefully our parents, if they're able to attend, are there to support, to watch, to have fun. But they're not doing any of the construction. They're not actually they're not giving advice during the session, etc. Okay. This is just another reminder. This got brought up earlier. Just because a device passed an invitational doesn't mean it's compliant for regionals. Judging in general is more strict at regionals. Our people are highly trained. Um, and also, they've just had more time to see the impact of other rules and how things are being done at invitationals to really have a better grasp of what the rules are saying. So, the best way to prepare for the judging of a build event at our regionals is to use our score sheets. And we post them on our website. So you can get to them a bunch of different ways. One of them is through resources. We have this entire VASO build event checklist and scoring spreadsheet like document. And so when I go to print these for tournaments, I'm literally clicking them in this document and printing them. So, like, boom. Okay, I can click. Here's the boom lever B checklist. Here's that top part that I was talking about that students will fill out. We have a copy for them. They'll write it down when they bring their pencil with them to impound or competition. And then you can see the exact questions, the exact statements that the event supervisors will be evaluating. So, one strategy that you may choose to use is, before competition, have students go through, measure their device, answer these exact questions. Now, for something like Boom, obviously testing the device would likely break the device. So I'm not saying you have to do like a full test, but the measurements in particular and like the construction parameters are huge. So that students aren't going to be surprised by something on tournament day. All right, so the supervisor will go through that entire checklist, make sure that they've answered every question on it during device testing. And then how that device will be tested is obviously unique for each event. So it's outlined in the rules and on those checklists. So students can read through those to be prepared for what that experience might be. But then when they're done testing, students can take that device back with them to their home base, put it in their car. Like, I don't care what they do with it. But if teams want to file an appeal about something that happened in the event, they should leave the device with the supervisors. And I'll talk more about appeals. Um, but normally, like what may initiate an appeal or like get a team thinking about an appeal is there's a question during the event about how a rule was interpreted or applied, or a competition parameter, or something they think was like not like equivalent testing conditions or something like that. And so that even if the coach isn't there to see it, if a team is like not really sure they agree with an event supervisor's ruling, they could, just to err on the side of caution, like leave a device in impound, leave it with the supervisor, and then those team members should go to their coach. Because appeals can only be initiated by coaches, or on occasion there are appeals that we initiate on the VASO side. Again, if we ever have like a question about a ruling or uncertainty in a ruling. Okay. But it's really important that we know parents, mentors, and competitors cannot initiate appeals. It has to come through the coach because it's actually done through the coach portal. So there's a button that shows up on the portal that says Tournament Day Appeals. If you intend to file an appeal, there's actually a fair bit of information that you need to collect to be able to do that. But one of the main things that will show up when you click on that is like we want to confirm your contact information, like your email and your phone number, so that we can make sure we get in touch with you about your appeal. Because we're at Centreville and we're all in the same building, we'll do our best to like do it face to face if we can. But especially if there are things happening at the end of the day, we want to be able to notify you. So just make sure that contact info is correct. And then there's this um, instruction box. So, what we ask for appeals is that the student or whoever was there will like go through what they think was done wrong. This will require coaches and the competitors to reread the event rules and clarifications. We expect that whoever's writing the appeal personally understands the rule, and that you, as the coach, are saying, yes, I've read this rule, and based on what the students have said or what I witnessed in the event, I believe this rule was not applied correctly. So, again, a successful appeal has to allege that we broke a rule or that your team's testing conditions were substantially different from other teams. What this cannot be is we didn't know about this rule shouldn't apply to us, or this is too hard. Okay. And you also have to file an appeal within an hour after your team finishes the event in question. So there is a timeliness factor to this. But the form will ask you which rule do you think was broken, describe the situation, what's the resolution that you would expect, etc. And then our appeals team reads those submissions. They may talk to the event supervisors They may come and talk to the coaches. Again, those purple wristbands will help us identify you really easily. And then, figure out if the appeal has merit or not. Just like impound FAQ, there's an appeals FAQ. So you can see, you know, some of those those frequently asked questions that I just kind of went over, like who can initiate, what kind of situations are appropriate. This is also on the resources page. So this also may be a really helpful document to share in the instance of a competitor or parent being unhappy with a situation. You can direct them to this FAQ to help determine whether this is something that fits the scope of what an appeal could be. But we give some examples. There, it talks through the procedure. Um, Again, I'm asking you to identify specific rule number, how it was not followed, and suggest an appropriate resolution. Okay. Sometimes, as a coach, this does mean that you may find that an appeal a competitor or a parent wants to file does not have merit. And then we ask that you have those hard conversations about, like, well, sometimes, things don't go the way we expect them to, but like they did follow this rule. And so this we can learn from this for next time. But of course, like if you think it has merit, that what you think we didn't follow a rule, like we want to know and we want to fix it. So that's why we have this process. All right. Are there questions about just general, like how appeals work or how impound or device testing works before I just go into the rest of the like session flow of the day? Anything? Okay. So the rest of the events that are not device events have a set time in which they are scheduled. It is by team number in the particular like sessions for your division. These match all of the event conflicts from the national rule book that we've published in September, so there's no changes or anything with that. Um, but they just need to like pay attention to which session they're supposed to go to for a given event. We don't make any changes to it. Okay. So again, we will not move teams to different session times to accommodate anyone who's coming in late, if there are any event conflicts, etc. We go by the schedule and we go by the times on the schedule. So if a student shows up late to an event, they likely will be welcomed in, but they just won't get that time back that they missed. So if they show up 10 minutes late, they can have the other 40 minutes remaining, but they won't get an extra 10 at the end. Okay. Most events will utilize the full session block of time. And so participants are expected to be there at the start of the session to receive instructions. So if someone shows up late, they may have to receive instructions first before they can begin, which would take even more of their time. Especially in our chemistry events, we want to make sure that they're getting all the clear safety information. You probably sound like a broken record, just like I do around this time of year with coaching, that like I say over and over, read your rules, make sure your teams are reading their rules and only bringing allowed materials. So if an event says that they're allowed to have one cheat sheet per team, front and back, then that's all they can have. Or if they're allowed to bring a binder, like they should know that they can do that and they can fill it with whatever information. Um, but those details are unique for every event, so they should be paying attention. Obviously, different calculators for different events as well. Make sure they, at minimum, also bring a writing utensil to all events and to impound. So really important that they have that. And I think that whether whether your competitors have watched any of our videos, whether they watch this video, whether, they've listened to you at practice, um, it's worth reiterating a bunch of this stuff again and encouraging them to like read our website, read the rule book, read the checklists, those score sheets for their build events, and then make sure that they're also checking the VASO clarifications for all events. Okay. So those clarifications are just as valid as rules, and we only follow VASO clarifications at our tournaments. There's a whole list of them, and you can sort them by event. Okay, so speaking of calculators, just wanted to remind you that there is a calculator class description in the rule book. It's C73 in the C rule book and B68 in the B rule book. If an event says that it's only allows class 2 calculators, then that means students can bring class 1 or class 2 calculators. They can always go down, they can't go up. So, like a class 2 calculator is a scientific calculator that's not a graphing calculator. Um, and then a class 1 is like a four function calculator. So, depending on their events, they may need to have other calculators than what they normally bring to school. I know a lot of students tend to bring graphing calculators, but we have events that don't allow that. And then they're never allowed to use their phone as a calculator. There's only like one event that allows laptops, and that is astronomy. So everything else, we're looking at like class 3 or below. No phones or smartwatches for calculators. Then for our chemistry events, there's also some additional stuff to pay attention to with their personal protective equipment. So in Division B, that's crime busters and potions and poisons. For Division C, that's forensics and materials science. For these events, students are completing a paper-based test and also a hands-on lab portion during their particular session. And so it's crucial that they bring their required safety equipment. If they don't have it, they will not be allowed in the room at all. Okay. Um, if they have their safety equipment, but they don't have their like kit of materials, like they're still allowed in, but they just are going to be at a really big disadvantage if they don't have like their chemistry box of stuff. So I'll show you where that is in the rule book. This is the B example. It's B67 in the B book and C72 in the C book. So for any chemistry event, they're allowed to just like bring a box that has any or all of this equipment in it. Um, Not all of the equipment's required. They can kind of curate their own kit to meet their needs of what they've used in practice. But if they don't bring any of this stuff, chances are they're not going to be able to do a lot of the lab task. And so that will put them at a real disadvantage. So this is just like strongly recommended. But if they show up without this box, that's okay as long as they have like their goggles and apron. Okay. These are things that you may have to be borrowing from your school, and so that might mean that you as the coach are bringing this box, but that's something to work out the week leading up to the tournament. Speaking of goggles, so again, they're not allowed to come into the room without the appropriate safety equipment. And so goggles for chemistry events are have different requirements than for like Boomaliever. So the goggles that we're looking for are indirect vent chemical splash protection goggles. So they look like the ones on the left in this picture. They're like fitting to the face all the way around, leave some nice goggle lines for you. Um, and they have those like little knobs that are black in the picture, those indirect vents. They must be indirect vent goggles. They don't have to look exactly like this. I picked ones that had a lot of contrast between the vent color and the goggle color. But they absolutely cannot be the goggles on the right, which have just like open holes. Those are not indirect vent, and they will not be allowed in the room with those goggles. Okay. They also can't have the ones that look like the ones at the very bottom. Again, they have to be like form fitting to the face. Okay. Now, there are many goggles that meet the chemistry criteria that also have a Z87 plus rating and can be used in the build events. So there are goggles out there that could be used for every event. And like I know my district, like the goggles that our schools buy meet that criteria. They're impact rated and also chemical resistant. But just take a look at the ratings on them to double check. Okay. This personal protective equipment picture is also available on our website. I've linked it on like all the events that need goggles. And I also give copies of this to the event supervisor so they have like a handy little reference sheet for tournament day. The other thing that they will need when they walk into a chemistry event is either a lab coat or an apron. Um, if depending on which one it is, they must cover their torso. They have to extend to at least mid thigh. Um, Ideally, they're like those chemical resistant, like rubberized aprons, but they don't have to be. And of course, if it's a lab coat, like we all know what that material looks like, but it has to go to at least mid thigh. Um, Other things that you'll note in the chemistry event rules are about like what they're required to wear underneath their apron. So they have to have long sleeves, like down to their wrists. They have to have long pants. They have to have closed-toed shoes. Their pants also can't be too tight, like they can't be leggings. They have to be looser. And that's like for a practical reason, if you spill something on your pants and they have direct contact with your skin, that chemical is going to pretty immediately be in contact with your skin. If they're looser, um, that like minimizes that contact. So just make sure that they're dressing appropriately. I know it's February, but like I feel like if I didn't say it, I'd still have a kid show up in shorts. So, please direct them to that if they're in forensics, material science, potions and poisons, or crime busters. All right. So, that's a lot of information, but a lot of it really is just reminding your team members to like read the rules and know what they need for their events. So, for you as a coach on tournament day, you've got check-in, 7:30 doors open. You're gonna get those wristbands, confirm your roster with us, and then distribute wristbands to your team members, making sure that the names go to the right kids. During the tournament, hopefully you are available to your team and to the families of your team for questions if they need to file an appeal. But also, I hope that you get to watch your team compete in some of the build events. That's part of the fun. And then after the tournament, um, you'll help direct your team in cleaning up their home base space, picking up everything that they brought with them, and then hopefully you stay for awards. So throughout all of this, you are the team connection to Vaso. Um, if there's a concern that your team has, like it's going to go through you to me or to other Vaso personnel. I will also share a couple days before the tournament with you how you can connect with us during the day. If the need arises, there's like a score room, like text line. But again, all in the same building, so chances are you can also find us in person since we're not like spread across campus. Okay. So, are there any questions leading up, like up till awards? And then we'll talk about like medals and trophies and whatnot. But anything else before awards?
Can I give a little bit of advice to new coaches?
Sure.
So, in general, usually if you have some kind of a captain or some kind of leadership students, when you have events coming up, usually I'm out event supervising or volunteering or something, have at least one kind of a student in your your area that can help give time updates, being like, you have 10 minutes before this next event. Make sure you have everything. I also always recommend that to tell your kids to get to their event at least maybe 10 or 5 minutes early. So if they realize, oh, they forgot something, they can run back to your home base and grab it. Because the biggest thing with these events is that the time is very precious. And if you want your kids to be prepared, having that extra time will really save them a lot. Because they're also kids. There's some of them are just they're not the best at time. So having someone to remind them if it's not you, maybe another adult volunteer or that leadership, just giving them time updates. Especially because they're in a school that they might not be familiar with either.
True, yeah. That's some great advice. Thank you, Heather.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the expectation is that the head coach is around for the entire day, right?
Yes.
But in case of like an emergency or in case we can't stay for the whole time, can I have a designated other adult parent or somebody, or how does that work?
Yes. So you are allowed to designate another adult, but it needs to be someone who's approved by your school. And then I would suggest that, I mean, they should have a coach portal account so that they can receive a coach wristband and also file appeals if needed on behalf of your team. But if you know in advance that you're gonna not be able to be there the whole day, you should already work with your school to like have them approve another person being a representative for you.
Thank you.
Okay, awards. So this is going to be we actually have a split awards ceremony. I believe in the schedule. It's like the Division C awards at 5 and the Division B awards at 6. And part of that is just because like the auditorium at Centreville literally could not hold them all. But also the B award ceremony is 2 in 1 because we have blueprint and infrared. So this is just the lay of the land with what to expect with awards. This is also available on the portal with our number of teams, how many schools are in each of those tracks, and then how many medals, trophies, and state bids will be awarding. So you can see that within Division B, we have more schools represented in the Blueprint division, and so that's why they have an extra medal, an extra trophy, an extra state bid because we go based on like schools when it comes to qualifying for the state tournament. So students don't qualify individually. They don't, there's no qualification by event other than with gold bids. But since we have more schools, we have a greater proportion of the state bids. And then it's based on the overall tournament placing of the school's highest placing team at its own regional. So if you have multiple teams, whichever one of your teams had the best score will be the one that's used to determine uh, state qualification. It's also important to note that if your school does qualify to send a team to states, you do not have to send the exact same students that were on that qualifying team. You can mix and match however you'd like. You could send 15 brand new kids as long as they go to your school. Um, so I know that means it's a little bit harder for coaches to then make those decisions between regionals and state, but it does give you flexibility to try to create the strongest team possible. All right. So I did say there was one exception to the like qualification by event. So if you have been with us for the past couple years, we are continuing our gold bids to the state tournament. So if a school does not qualify overall for the state tournament, but does have an event team that takes gold, which first place in a regional event, we invite those specific students of that event team to come to the state tournament and compete in that event. So it is a way that we can motivate some of our smaller programs or newer programs that may not be able to secure a state qualification, but can still be recognized at the state level for their strong performance. And at the Langley Regional, last weekend, I think we had four. We had a B, Division B gold bid in hovercraft, and we had three Division C bids in remote sensing, hovercraft, and electric vehicle. So very exciting. Um, so the example that I always use is from this Michigan setup. Um, it's important to know that like how this works at the state tournament. They like are acting as an exhibition team when they compete. Again, it has to be those exact same students who won the gold medal at the regional. Um, they are recognized for their work, but they're not taken away from the other like full state team performances. They are allowed to compete in trial events, but they don't get to compete in all other events. So just the ones they're invited for and our trials if they would like. And then after the award ceremonies, we do post all our full results on Duosmium after the tournament so you can see the full picture of how everybody did, the overall totals, etc. Oh, once again, it says Langley, and then you can see the next line says Centreville. You'd think with the snow days, I would have had more time, and yet here we are. Centerville concessions and lunch. They are going to be running concessions throughout the day. Please support them if you can. Centerville does a great job hosting. I think this is their third year hosting for us. Um, and then coaches, I did send out their pizza pre-order form. Um, and so those orders are due Tuesday, February 3rd at 3 p.m. If you are asking for, if you need an invoice to be able to provide to your um, finance people at your school, sometimes they may accept like the Google form, like if you send it to yourself, or you can just reach out to Centerville. I think they have their contact information on that form. They can help you out. Okay. But they'll take cash or check, submitted at concession. So it's just an easy way to take care of lunch for your students, but they will have other things available for purchase as well. All right, everybody. What questions do we have? That's all I got. I feel like that's enough. Yeah, Carol.
Um, I have a question about this written event. Let's say anatomy.
Right.
Are they allowed to separate out the test booklet?
It depends on the particular event instructions. So that will be something that event supervisors in the session would be able to answer for them.
Okay, so the event supervisor will decide, but it will be consistent throughout the day.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Well, for those of you live, I'll stick around for a little bit after this recording is done to answer any other questions you have. Otherwise, I will definitely be in touch again before we see you on the 7th with final reminders for our teams, but it'll be here before you know it. All right. Thanks, guys.